Hey guys, welcome to You the Boss podcast, episode 85. And I want to talk about something today that I think a lot of us are quietly going through, but not always saying it out loud. And it's that feeling of outgrowing your life. Not in necessarily a dramatic way, not in a burn it down kind of way, but in that subtle kind of uncomfortable, hard to explain way where things that used to feel normal just don't feel right anymore. Maybe your routines don't feel aligned. Maybe certain relationships or conversations are draining to you now. Maybe you're looking at your life and you're thinking, why isn't this fitting the way that it used to? Why why am I feeling so off all of a sudden? And if that's you, I just want to say right from the beginning of this episode, there's nothing wrong with you. It's not that you're feeling ungrateful. It's not that you're too much. It's not that all of a sudden you're switching it up in a bad way. You're evolving. And with growth, real growth, it always feels like a loss. It feels like a loss before there's like real alignment. So I'm going to divide this episode a little bit into different parts. And part 1 of this episode is, what does it actually mean to outgrow yourself? Outgrowing yourself isn't about becoming a completely different person overnight. It's about just becoming a more honest version of you and who you are already. The truth is, a lot of versions of ourselves that we live in, we build them to survive. So in the moment, we may become easygoing so that we wouldn't feel rejection, so that we wouldn't upset others. You became the strong one because we didn't want anyone to see us struggle. The low maintenance friend, the one that we don't have to talk to all the time so that we wouldn't feel like a burden. The one who settles because it felt safer than wanting more. You almost feel guilty when you want more. And those versions of yourself, they served a purpose. Like I mentioned, that survival mode. They got you through certain seasons. They protected you. They helped you navigate life with the tools that you had at the time. But just because something helped you survive doesn't mean that it's meant to come with you to the next version of yourself. And that's where things start to shift. It's why these feelings of feeling like things are different, things are changing, that's why they come up. So part 2 is kind of explaining why letting go feels so hard, why it feels so difficult all of a sudden to kind of let go of these things that have been with us for so long. Letting go sounds empowering in theory. It sounds like maybe you have wanted to do this thing and now you're ready to do it. Now you're ready to keep going. But at the same time, that letting go can also feel really heavy. In reality, it's not that you're just letting go of habits or routines. You're also letting go of these different identities. You're letting go of the person that maybe you've created so that certain people could be met at their expectation. The version of you that maybe other people are comfortable with. The version of you that they are familiar with. And now there's grief in that. There's grief in letting go of who this person is and kind of introducing yourself back to who you are. Even if you've outgrown something, there is still love there. There's still love to appreciate in that person that's carried you to where you are. And it's kind of like a piece of clothing. Maybe it doesn't quite fit the same anymore, or maybe the material has started to deteriorate and it's still kind of hard to let it go. It's still hard to put it in that donation box. And one of the biggest reasons that this is so difficult is because of guilt. The voice that in your mind is saying you've changed. What, you think you're better than someone now? Why can't you just be happy with where you are? Why do you want more? But there's a reframe. that I want you to hold on to in this. And that is, you can honor who you were without staying there. Growing, that growth is not betrayal, it's honesty. So I want to give you, some signs that maybe you're outgrowing yourself. I want to call those out to you. Maybe that feels like sometimes, you're not feeling that it's happening, but we just feel off. Something just doesn't feel quite right. So some of those signs are that you're feeling drained by things that you used to tolerate. You're feeling drained by certain conversations, certain relationships. You notice that certain environments or conversations don't resonate anymore. Maybe some people are still talking about the same thing from 5 or 6 years ago, and you're just kind of not. You just kind of don't resonate with that anymore. You feel uncomfortable pretending you're okay with things that you've outgrown. You start craving more peace, more depth, more alignment, more substance. You feel this internal pull towards something different, but you still can't kind of explain it. And one of the biggest signs is that you can't unsee what you now know. Once your awareness shifts, once you become aware that something feels off, or you become aware that, that you've done some changing, that you've reevaluated some things, you can't shrink back to your old self. You aren't able to do that without feeling it, without feeling the aches and pains of trying to squeeze yourself into something that doesn't fit anymore. So, if things feel uncomfortable lately, if things feel heavy, I want you to ask yourself, what in my life no longer fits me? Not what's wrong, not what needs to be fixed, just what feels out of alignment now. We're going to talk a little bit about how to start letting go, and we're going to make these practical. You know, Becoming aware of something is great, but we also need action. So, number one, I want you to have an identity audit. Take a moment and ask yourself, who did I need to survive that part and that season of my life? And then ask yourself, who am I being called to become now? There's going to be a gap between these two versions. And in that gap is where you're going to see the growth on yourself. Number two, the expiration list. I want you to write this down. What in my life has expired? That can be habits, roles, mindsets, relationships. And the important part of this one is not for you to judge yourself on them. Instead, I want you to thank them. Thank them for how they've served you. Acknowledge those things. Because you can release something with gratitude. When you're getting rid of something, when you're, changing in these moments of growth, you don't need to carry guilt with that. It's okay to process these things without guilt and just have gratitude on them. Number three, the alignment check. Before you say yes to something, pause and ask yourself, is this expanding me or is this shrinking me? Is this aligned with who I'm becoming or just familiar to who I've been? Familiar doesn't always mean that it's right. It just means that you know it. And I've said this before on this podcast that sometimes you can feel almost like afraid, but it's actually not fear. It's more so that it's excitement for something different. Number four, boundaries that match your growth. As you evolve, your boundaries evolve too. And that might look like saying no without over explaining, not overextending yourself, protecting your time and your energy differently. Now, when I say these things, I want to be very clear. I know that in today's world, a lot of people are manipulating. I think it's manipulating, not manipulizing. A lot of people are manipulating going to therapy, and they're manipulating, quote unquote, having boundaries, and they're manipulating, being so self-aware. So when I'm saying, saying no without over explaining yourself or not overextending yourself or even protecting your time and your energy, I'm not talking about you being a crappy person when you've committed to something and then all of a sudden you don't want to do it. I'm not talking about making plans for months with someone and then last minute just being like, never mind, and justifying yourself in that. That's not what I'm talking about. And I hope that you understand that's not what I mean. But what I'm really meaning is when those things become uncomfortable in, saying no without over explaining or not overextending yourself, it feels uncomfortable because people are used to an old version of you. And here's the truth. Growth requires adjustment. Not everyone is going to understand your boundaries. Not everyone is going to be on board with this different version of you. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be that version of you. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't have these certain boundaries. And that doesn't mean that you need to let people overstep them. You still need them. Tool number 5, visualize your next version. I want you to take this moment right now and I want you to close your eyes and picture this. A version of you that feels aligned, that feels grounded, that feels at peace. How do they move about their day? What do they tolerate? And what don't they tolerate anymore? How do they carry themselves in those moments where they need to kind of make sure that what they're tolerating aligns with them? How do they speak to themselves? That version of you isn't far away. You just need to honor that version of yourself through small, consistent choices. I've mentioned a few times in this podcast about outgrowing relationships. This part people don't talk about a lot in adulthood. There's the constant chasing, it almost feels like, where you're chasing relationships because you've been friends with them for 20 years. And like, we've been friends since we were in kindergarten. We've been friends all our lives. And while that is such a beautiful thing, sometimes you're outgrowing relationships and you're just keeping them along because you've been with them for so long. And I'm not saying like you should roll over tomorrow and cut people off or be harsh. It means that sometimes what one person is going through does not align with how you're growing right now. Some people are tied to a version of you that no longer exists, and that can also be hard to deal with. It's learning how to differentiate when you should or shouldn't stay in those dynamics, because when you stay in those dynamics, sometimes you're actually shrinking yourself just to keep the connection, just to keep, this person that you've been friends with for X amount of time, or this relationship that you've had because, we've been friends for so long and they've been through this with me and that with me. And maybe you're just not growing together. And I'm not here to villainize someone, because we're very quick in these moments of realigning ourselves to say that person's not growing. We're not going in the same direction together. They don't want anything out of life. And we're not trying to villainize anyone. You don't need to create conflict. You don't need to uproot your whole life and say, you're not growing. I don't want you in my life anymore. And just tossing people aside. But you are allowed to create a distance, to create a little bit more peace for yourself over the fact that you have history with this person. And that's probably one of the hardest and most powerful things that you can do. And moving a little bit towards the end of this episode, I want you to take with you that outgrowing yourself is not a loss. It's just a transition. It's an initiation into a more aligned, more honest version of your life. And yes, this is isolating. This can be lonely. This can just feel so heavy sometimes. But that doesn't mean that you're on the wrong path. It actually means that you're on the right one. So be patient with yourself in this season of growing. Give yourself permission to evolve, to want more, to choose differently. The version of you that got you here deserves gratitude. But the version of you that's trying to emerge, that version of you also deserves your courage. If this episode resonated with you, please take a moment to reflect on what you're currently outgrowing and what you're currently stepping into. And I'll talk to you next week.